On the final day of campaigning before the French presidential election, French security officials are worried about more than just the election results. Disruptive protests have plagued both candidates, but two separate security alerts in and around Paris on Friday raised concerns over safety in the French capital. A former soldier who was found with an ISIS pledge and a variety of weapons was arrested, and Greenpeace activists successfully climbed the Eiffel Tower to hang a banner opposing far-right candidate Marine Le Pen. One French official said, quote, "Above and beyond the motives, this publicity stunt in the current climate exposes faults in the security arrangements at the Eiffel Tower." It makes sense that French officials are feeling a little cautious. Several days before the first round of voting in this election, a police officer was killed on duty. ISIS later claimed responsibility for the attack. France is also still under a state of emergency following the Paris attacks of 2015.
Slowly but surely, English is losing importance.
European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker apparently thinks the English language is going out of style.
Qu'on m'avait préparé.
He went on to deliver the rest of his remarks in French. The European Union has 24 official languages and chiefly conducts business in its three most widely spoken tongues, English, French, and German. But the number of native English speakers in the EU is about to plummet thanks to Brexit. Some Europeans have called for the EU to drop English from its list of official languages. Brexit won't make a dent in the EU's use of English right away, though. It's still the most common second language learned throughout the bloc. But Juncker's sudden burst of Francophilia might have been a nod towards France's presidential election this weekend. If far-right candidate Marine Le Pen wins, that country could also start making its way out of the EU.
Tens of thousands of people have hit the streets of Poland's capital, Warsaw, to take part in a so-called Liberty March. The rally was organised by opposition groups to protest against what they see as the country's drift towards authoritarianism. They accuse Poland's ruling Law and Justice Party of undermining democratic standards and the rule of law.
On a good day, the shelves of this grocery store were largely empty. Now they contain nothing at all. Huge inflation and widespread shortages of food, medicine, and other basic goods have led to mass looting across Venezuela.
Vandalism ruined everything. They burned everything, destroyed everything.
Today we are hungry, and tomorrow we will be hungrier still, because there is nothing.
In the chaos of mass demonstrations, dozens of supermarkets, restaurants, and cargo trucks have been looted by crowds, often driven by hunger. Restaurants in cities like Valencia remain closed, as do many of the country's shops. People have to queue for hours to buy basic supplies, which have often run out by the time they reach the front. The economic crisis has sparked 2 months of massive protests against the socialist government of President Nicolas Maduro, leaving dozens dead and hundreds injured. Protesters are demanding early elections to remove Maduro. They say his plan to reform the constitution will only strengthen his grip on power. The opposition has refused to back down, leaving division and violence across Venezuela, which is only likely to get worse.
Students in Puerto Rico will be experiencing the economic crisis there firsthand. Officials say 184 public schools will shut down at the end of the month, which is expected to save millions of dollars. This is the largest mass school closure in the island's history. In another historic move, the U.S. territory declared bankruptcy a few days ago. Officials say the 27,000 students whose schools are closing will all be relocated.
India's top court has upheld death sentences for 4 men convicted in the gang rape and torture of a woman on a moving bus in New Delhi. The fatal attack on the 23-year-old medical student in 2012 sparked widespread protests and turned the international spotlight on violence against women. Judges said the crime met the rarest of the rare standard needed to justify capital punishment.
It is not just the award of the death penalty, but the reasoning of the court, which is more important for me, because there is a detailed justification as to why in such cases death penalty ought to be given. And I think this is an important precedent, not only for this case, but for society at large.
The 4 attackers were sentenced to death in 2013, while a 5th man hanged himself in prison during the original trial. This is not justice for the poor, he says. The Constitution of India and the Supreme Court says justice for all. We didn't get justice for all, and this is not justice. The attackers repeatedly raped the woman after luring her and a male friend onto the bus. Both were beaten with a metal bar before being dumped on a road. The woman later died in hospital. Her father says the death sentences are a victory for each and every woman in India.
In western Indonesia, at least 200 inmates have broken out of an overcrowded jail. The incident occurred when guards allowed inmates to take part in Friday prayers in the Muslim-majority nation. At least 80 inmates have been recaptured, but hundreds of police are still searching for those on the run. Officials say the jail has a capacity of around 700, but was housing around 1,800.
A clash between Afghan and Pakistani forces killed at least 9 people, including civilians, and injured dozens more. Gunfire erupted May 5th while a Pakistani census team was counting people near the border town of Chaman. Afghan police officials accused the census team and the Pakistani troops guarding them of crossing the border into Afghanistan. Zia Durrani, spokesman for the police in Kandahar province, told Reuters Pakistani security officials were using the census as a cover for, quote, malicious activities. The Pakistani military said in a statement Afghan authorities were warned in advance that census workers would be near the border. Pakistan accused Afghanistan of, quote, creating hurdles for census workers. Al Jazeera says Pakistan's ongoing census has sparked a contentious political debate in the country and that there have been at least 2 deadly attacks on census workers since March.
Thousands of opposition activists have taken part in an authorized rally in Moscow to mark the 5-year anniversary since the Bolotnaya Square protest. The 2012 anti-government demonstration was marred by violence, with police detaining scores of protesters.
President Vladimir Putin has backed an investigation into reports of a violent crackdown on gay people in the Russian Republic of Chechnya. While gay rights activists were detained at this May Day rally in St. Petersburg, the Kremlin leader has now broken his silence on the scandal, telling Russia's human rights ombudswoman that he will intervene. Putin said he would talk to the Prosecutor General and Interior Minister to ask them to help her look into the reports concerning, he said, what's going on with a non-traditional sexual orientation in the North Caucasus. His intervention comes days after Germany's Angela Merkel raised with him reports that gay people were being detained and tortured in the predominantly Muslim republic run by Moscow-backed strongman Ramzan Kadyrov. He denies human rights are routinely abused in Chechnya or that it has any gay people.
The F-35A, the U.S. Air Force's new radar-evading combat jet, is spreading its wings across Europe. To get a closer look at the super stealthy jet, we hopped in an F-15 to fly alongside. The F-35As, seen here flying in formation with F-15s, have been dispatched by the Pentagon to exercise in Europe for the first time. They're flying with allies across the continent, including near the Russian border, amid rising political strain between Washington and Moscow. In April, the U.S. sent F-35s for training to Estonia and Bulgaria.
What you do with a new fighter aircraft is you start to branch out and learn the capabilities of the aircraft. Gives us the opportunity to do our first ocean crossing, deploy to an allied country and area to further training and see how the aircraft will operate in a different environment.
The drill is part of a broader U.S. effort to showcase its military commitment to European states in the wake of Russia's annexation of Crimea and support for separatists in Ukraine. The mission is one of the Trump administration's most visible signals that it will continue to support its European allies. The F-35, also called the Joint Strike Fighter, still exists in only relatively small numbers, but the Pentagon and some foreign buyers, including the UK, Norway, Israel, and Japan, will combine to buy thousands. But the program has not been without its hiccups. It all doesn't come cheap, and in some respects, our F-15 has more oomph than the new kid on the block. The F-35s are here in the UK for only a few weeks, but the US Air Force plans to permanently station them here in the future.
The U.S. State Department is pushing back against an agreement that bans U.S. military aircrafts from flying over designated safe zones in Syria. The deal setting up those zones was hammered out by Russia, Turkey, and Iran. It goes into effect today.
The Syrian capitals enjoyed a rare night of peace as a plan for safe zones in the country drawn up by Russia, Turkey, and Iran came into force at midnight Damascus time. And the plan includes establishing no-fly zones in 4 areas of de-escalation. But RT's Murad Gazdiev looks at how the definition of what a no-fly zone is seems to depend on who's proposing it.
A no-fly zone can mean very different things. A Russian one, for example, actually means no fly. No one gets to fly. No, not even just a little bit.
The work of combat aircraft in de-escalation zones is not expected at all, with or without notification. The issue is closed.
Details. The Russians want 4 safe zones in Syria, places over which no one flies, no one bombs, and no one surveils. 4 areas where people can go and feel as safe as possible in Syria. Needless to say, the idea isn't new.
Some variation of a no-fly zone or a safe zone.
And I advocate today a no-fly zone and safe zones.
We must move forward to try to immediately ground all aircraft flying in those key areas.
They didn't actually mean what you thought they meant. What all those fellas want is an area where they, and only they, can fly.
I would not agree that coalition aircraft ought to be grounded. I do agree that Syrian regime aircraft and Russian aircraft should be grounded.
Right out of the horse's mouth. Notice Russian and Syrian jets, not American, not British, truly a we fly, you don't zone. It's worked wonders before. Yugoslavia, Iraq, Libya, not what you call success stories. You think, how is it that these no-fly zones always end with NATO or the United States bombing the people they don't like? Well, they've got that figured out.
Military experts across the world know that a no-fly zone requires certain actions taken to protect the planes and the pilots, including bombing targets like the Libyan defense systems.
It's ingenious. If you send jets into a no-fly zone and someone tries to shoot them down, then you've got to defend yourself by annihilating everything from the air. Not this time. If the Russians get their way, in Syria, no-fly will mean no fly.
The apps on your phone may be eavesdropping on you. A new article in Wired magazine claims that apps have increasingly incorporated ultrasonic tones to track consumers. They ask permission to access your smartphone microphone, then listen for inaudible beacons. My colleague Vladimir Dutier spoke with the writer of the piece, Lily Hay Newman, about how it all works.
So Lily, let's talk about this. What kind of apps are we talking about here?
Yeah, it's all sorts of things that could be using this technology. It could be brands, looking to find out more information about their customers. Could be used for things like events, ticketing. So there's all sorts of ways you can imagine that it could be used.
So take me through the steps. I'm browsing. I love guitars. I'm browsing the Guitar Center website.
Right.
Take me through, and we're not saying that they are the ones that engage in this practice, but I'm just using this as an example.
Yeah, definitely. So one thing that could happen is their website could emit one of these ultrasonic frequencies. And if your microphone on a device like a phone or your computer is set up to be listening and has the permission to be listening to that, it'll hear it come from the web page, and then it'll report in to the app that's on your phone that asks for the permission, saying, oh, this person loaded this web page, and the way they know it's you is because it's your phone.
The NSA was collecting millions of Americans' phone records. The public has questioned exactly how much privacy they actually have. But now facial recognition is a growing concern for those who feel as though their privacy is already being infringed. RT's Natasha Sweet has more on the showdown between Georgetown University suing the NYPD over privacy and technology. Facial recognition technology isn't something new, but as more Americans are becoming aware of exactly how much their personal information is being stored, more are seeing their liberties being infringed upon. As local police departments are joining the FBI in building up their databases, Georgetown University conducted a year-long study to see exactly how information is being stored. According to the study, law enforcement facial recognition networks include more than 117 million Americans. The study claims law enforcement agencies do little to ensure their systems are accurate. Out of more than 100 agencies, the study cites only 8 facial recognition systems accurately narrow down potential matches. FBI Director James Comey says that he understands the fear around the technology, but wants people to see how it enables law enforcement to bring people to justice. Take a listen.
I understand some of this thinking in a post-Snowden world, but I believe it is mostly based on a failure to understand why we in law enforcement do what we do and how we do it.
When Georgetown conducted this study, 106 agencies responded to their requests and 15 did not. While the NYPD did respond, they only provided Georgetown with a single-page document. The university then filed a lawsuit against NYPD for failing to fully comply with their Freedom of Information request. In a press release, the university slams the NYPD's short response and claims 5 years of data should have far more findings than a single-page document. The university claims as of 2016, the NYPD has 8,500 facial recognition investigations. Well, that leads them to almost 3,000 possible matches, leading to almost 2,000 arrests. Claire Garvey, the associate at the Center on Privacy and Technology who filed the original document request, said in a written statement, quote, face recognition is too powerful and its price on privacy and civil liberties too high to not be controlled by robust policies and training guides. Well, the study claims this technology should be transparent and publicly accountable.
In a medical setting, cleanliness is key. But now a deadly superbug is slowly invading hospitals in the Northeast. It's called Candida auris, and the CDC says more than 60 cases of the resilient fungus have already been identified, mostly in New York and New Jersey. First spotted in 2009 in Japan, the superbug can be transferred between people and medical equipment, causing bloodstream infections, wound infections, and ear infections. At least 4 deaths in the U.S. have been tied to the virus. Even more alarming, the superbug is resilient to all 3 classes of antifungal medicine doctors use. Those facing the highest risks are patients in intensive care and those with a catheter and a large vein. Right now, conventional lab tests can lead to misidentification of the little-known fungus. So the CDC is working aggressively to learn as much as it can about the superbug before it spreads even further.
The tornado sirens went off probably 30 seconds ahead of it.
We just got in the basement and the tornado hit. Took 2 minutes.
It came with within 15 minutes and was here and gone.
It's an experience we hear about all too often. Tornado survivors describing how the powerful storms seemingly come out of nowhere.
Minutes can mean the difference between life and death. And while advances have been made in detecting tornadoes, forecasters are still unable to predict exactly when and where a twister will touch down. Tony DeCopel is here with the effort to increase the warning time. Tony, good morning.
Good morning. Researchers at 4 universities are working to improve forecasting by using drones. The unmanned aircraft can do what the rest of us cannot, flying into the heart of dangerous weather systems to collect data on the storms.
13 minutes. That's the average time between the detection of a tornado forming to when it touches down, leaving people in its path scrambling to find a safe place.
Let's look at the condensate coming up. Oh, man!
This countdown was a reality for parts of the Midwest and South earlier last week as severe storms and tornadoes battered the areas, leaving at least 14 people dead.
Oh my gosh!
Unlike other weather systems, tornadoes form quickly, are hard to predict, and even harder to track. Jamie Jacob and his team from Oklahoma State University are working on a set of drones designed to fly into and analyze severe weather systems.
The meteorologists are very good at predicting when and where the storm is going to develop, but not so good at determining when a storm is going to form a tornado at a particular place or a particular time.
They're built to withstand rain, hail, and winds of at least 80 miles an hour. And they drop a device called a dropsonde that collects data from inside a potential tornado.
So the goal is to be able to get more data that feeds directly into those models and do that in real time.
That real-time data can be a key factor in saving lives when a tornado is beginning to form.
We can get to the point where we can warn an hour ahead of time.
The drones need a few more years of testing before being put to use by the National Weather Service.
The technology is a little ahead of the regulatory processes, however, so we may have to wait for the legal side to catch up with us.
On Friday afternoon, heavy rain soaked the New York City area, causing local flooding and an array of transportation delays across the heavily populated area. For much of New York City and several suburban counties, the National Weather Service issued flash flood warnings as a weather system that stretched across much of the eastern seaboard dumped 3 inches of rain on the metropolitan region in just 3 hours. New York City's Office of Emergency Management said that the rain forced the closure of a major thoroughfare along the Hudson River for at least 10 blocks and caused extensive traffic delays citywide.